Welcome back, my martial arts nerds. As always, I'm Greg Koval, and this is System Breakdowns. Today we're talking about Robert Whittaker, who obviously has an upcoming fight in a few weeks against Israel Adesanya. Now, we're not going to go into specifics of that fight in this video. We're going to do a separate pre-fight analysis video for that. But today I want to break down Robert Whittaker and the systems that he employs that allows him to be so successful, and why he's only lost one fight since 2014 and has one of the longest fight win streaks within the UFC history. This guy is fantastic. He is a great example of systems, and today we're going to be talking about things like the blitz and luring principle. We're going to be talking about the defenses he employs, how he lands his blitzes safely. We're going to talk about how he makes you forget about techniques and then comes back to them, and then how he sets and breaks patterns to set up his techniques. Really phenomenal stuff, not only for his striking, but also for his grappling and wrestling, and how he uses a very simplistic approach that's allowed him to beat guys like Yoel Romero, Jacare, like really fantastic wrestlers and grapplers, and because he has a very simplistic approach that he can consistently use, and that's what we're talking about today. So that being said, stay tuned, and let's start breaking down Robert Whittaker. Okay, guys, so before we start talking about offense, I want to start talking about movement and defensive tactics. And this is going to be very important to understanding the way that he builds his offensive strategy and understanding kind of lay the groundwork for things like countering, blitzing, defensive wrestling, stuff like that. Generally speaking, he fights in a very point style footwork, very similar to what you see out of like a Wonder Boy. But as opposed to Wonder Boy who bounces the whole time, he tends to lean a little bit more forward on this front leg. Now, when you fight that type of a style, your footwork, your defense is mostly comprised of footwork and head movement. Although he does bring his hands up in frame and stuff like that, but most of your defense tends to be based off of movement of your head and feet. So you're going to see a lot of escaping his head out as things happen. It also allows him to keep his front hand low. Now, when you talk about defense for a guy who's a point-style striker, and that's what he is because of his 8 years of Goju Ryu karate, he is essentially a point striker who blitzes and lures guys into counters. When you fight that style, your opponent has to deal with this in one of two ways. Either they can sit back and try to counter you, which is what you see out of a lot of his fights, like Jacare, Yoel Romero, Israel Adesanya, who was very successful at that. Or you have guys like Derek Brunson who are going to just try to overwhelm you and rush past this and blitz past it and just get you up against a wall so you can't move. These are the two strategies he knows he has to deal with. So, when you talk about the counter-striking, we're going to talk about that more when we talk about how he employs the blitz. But when you talk about range management, you talk about guys pressing forward, this is the majority of what he has to really be concerned with because he's an outside fighter. So he doesn't have to stay in range of a lot of their attacks. And because they have to basically blitz to get to him, he has reactive time. Because of this point-style footwork, it allows him to explode out as quicker than they're moving forward. And he's going to generally add in some additional stuff to keep himself safe. Now, most of the time he's looking for counters, but sometimes, if he's getting overwhelmed, you're going to see this backhand come up to defend his head, and this front hand is often going to be a frame. This is what he used a lot against Derek Brunson. Keeps him at bay. And then if he gets overwhelmed, he retreats back, and he can roll out. Now, in the case of Derek Brunson became overcommitted almost every time he came in, and he was able to use this to pull his head forward, land uppercuts, sprawl on him, force him to take shots as his head was pulled forward and sprawl on him, stuff like that. So Derek Brunson overcommitted, and Robert Whittaker was able to exploit this by staying composed, keeping his hands covered high as he got to the wall. He knew that he couldn't use the footwork and head movement, so instead he covers up and rolls under a lot. And it allowed him to stay safe, to give himself time to do the attacks and counters that he's looking for. Now, some other things that you'll see him do. Most of the time, like I said, he's looking for doing some sort of a counter striking, especially in his last 3 fights. You see a lot of this, luring to the counters. But some of the things that he'll do also is that as guys press forward, you'll see this front elbow come up a lot. And either this is a timing thing where he feels like the counter's not right, where he'll bring this up and drop his head off. But a lot of times it's because you end up in a clash sometimes. When you charge on a guy, it's very common to clash and end up in a clinch. So what happens is, as guys come in here, this hand comes up, and he's more than willing to catch him with an elbow. This both creates space and frames out, and also does a little bit of damage. But unlike a guy like Leon Edwards, who really is looking to connect that elbow on the forehead and cut this guy open, Robert Whittaker is mostly concerned with getting this in the way, defending his head, and creating a frame so that he can change his angle and get out of there. And what's nice is that as guys try to rush him, whether he's here and he rolls under and he resets out this way, this is very similar to what you see out of like Machida. Machida used to do this a lot where if he got overwhelmed, he'd cover his head and reset and let guys re-engage. And he would circle as many times as he needed to. We talk about that in his system breakdown till he could reset on his terms. Robert Whittaker does this a little bit different. He backs up, and what he does is from here, as he rolls out, he knows guys start chasing him, so he backs up, and now, especially in the last couple fights where he's become more counter-oriented, he uses this to pull them into a counter. Because what do you do if you start chasing somebody and they start running away? You chase after them. It's human nature. He uses this to pull them into a counter strike, and this is very, very smart tactics. So he's in here, he's relaxed, then you start chasing him, he backs off, whether he's framing here or here, he rolls under, goes to reset, and as they come in, he'll catch them. It's a very smart tactic. So that is the majority of what you're going to see out of movement. One of the things I want to address, though, is that one of the weaknesses he's shown, Jared Cannonier was able to exploit this, Yoel Romero was able to exploit this. He's had a couple of guys that this has been an issue with the leg kicks. Now, fortunately for him, it has never stopped him from being successful in his fights. I mean, there's a reason that he's won I think 12 of his last 13 fights. You know, he's had one loss since 2014. Clearly, it's not slowing him down that much. And so the leg kick thing, I would like to see a little bit of improvement out of that personally, because with a bladed stance, you can get caught. If you look at guys like Wonder Boy, instead of trying to check here, he pulls his foot out and counters. Now, Robert Whittaker can kind of get away with this a little bit by using distance management. This has been his big tool for that, and he stays out of range so that as they come in, he doesn't engage with it too much, but guys are opportunists, they're going to connect on it. And so he's gotten caught on the back of the leg a bunch in the past, and that's caused him a little bit of problems, but never enough to stop him from winning. So I would say, while this is his tool, using the space is his biggest tool to prevent getting a lot of leg kicks, and being more active and more aggressive offensively has protected him, I would like to encourage, instead of trying to check, drawing back and countering into a punch or something like that, or a step over. I think the Wonder Boy method of the drawback is the best. The other thing I want to talk about is a lot of times the other thing that you'll see him do from a range managed standpoint, this is where leg kicks come in a lot. You will see him do a lot of front leg side kicks to the leg, and you will see him do a lot of front kicks to the body. He does this both to keep them at bay as a range management tool, but also offensively to pick them apart. But I wanted to mention it in the defensive section because this is something else he's really good at. And when you combine this with the fact that in the last 3 fights, his countering game has been just on point of drawing them into a counter, it makes him very hard to blitz on. And so between the fact that, you know, he's got this elbow, he's going to back up and circle out, he's got this great counter timing, and the fact that he does a lot of stopping techniques, it's very hard to overwhelm a guy like this. This gives him the freedom to play his blitz game, and we'll talk about that in the next section. Okay, guys, so let's start by talking about some of his offensive tactics here. To begin with, what you'll see is this kind of like in-between timing where he'll attack stuff and he'll kind of pick them apart, and he'll throw jabs, he'll throw leg kicks, stuff like that. He might throw one-offs here, but he's doing this to kind of set the stage to set and break patterns. So what you'll see is sometimes he might do something like a leg kick, right? Attack the leg kick, and then while you're thinking about that, he might feint the jab, come forward in a big punching motion. One of the attacks he likes to use is these big overhands. But what he does to keep himself safe, and this is an important tactic here, he never puts his head really at risk as he comes in because he knows the concern is getting counter shot. So as he comes in, his head comes way off the line and he steps off at an angle. So he's not in front of them when he's connecting. He's at the side. And what he does is when he finishes his blitz, one of two things. Either he'll break through at a 45, or as he finishes, he steps out to the side here. He never finishes right in front of them. This is an important blitzing tactic so that you don't stop. If you're going to blitz on somebody, you either need to finish it with a clinch or you need to get out of there. And he chooses to disengage because he doesn't want to clinch. He wants to stay at his distance so he can pick them apart. So one of the things he'll use, like I said, is he might leg kick, jab, jab, and then while they're thinking about jab, he switches it up and he goes the other side. Then he'll start doing stuff where he'll use combination, like he likes to use like a jab, jab, a double jab cross or something like that, where he comes in here, bah, bah, bah. Once again, keeping his head low, and then he finishes it with a disengage. Nice exit strategies, always employed. Probably, or easily his favorite combination is the jab cross roundhouse kick. And he employs it in one of two ways. Either one, he'll set it up with the jab a few times, maybe a jab cross, he'll bah, bah. And then as he comes in and gets used to it, he'll go jab, feint the cross, and he'll stop short and go to the high section roundhouse kick. So it's bah, 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 and he connects cleanly on it. Sorry, I'm not going to kick too hard because my wife's doing a telehealth. The other way you'll see him throw it is he'll throw his jab cross, come out to the side, and kind of post on them as he pushes them away, and then he comes high to the roundhouse kick. This is very similar to a technique I do where I post the shoulder away if I can get to a back corner. But he comes in as part of a blitz where he goes, bah, 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 and he posts on the shoulder. And sometimes there's a slight pause there where he comes in here, pauses, and then comes high with this roundhouse kick. And it's interesting because he doesn't pivot on it. He kind of stays here in front of them, throws his kick, and disengages. Then he starts tying in with other stuff. So some of the things you'll see him do is after he's thrown a couple punches, he'll feint the punch or he'll step and throw the roundhouse kick. So while you're thinking about the jab that he's thrown a couple times, maybe double, then he'll start changing heights. Where he'll do stuff like coming into the mid or low. Then he'll start doing stuff where he'll feint. This is what I'm talking about, setting and breaking patterns. Then what I like that he does is he makes you forget about stuff. He'll stop using stuff. That jab cross roundhouse kick. He loves it. You might see him use it a lot in one round, not use it for 2 more rounds, and then do a lot of this jab cross. And when guys forget about it, and this is how he lands his big headshots. Because guys forget about that head kick because he stops using it for 2 rounds. He doesn't overuse techniques, and I love this about him. He has his favorites that he uses, then he stops using it, makes you forget about it, and then he hits you with it. Very, very important, successful strategy that he uses for his blitzes. So the important thing to notice out of this is 1, keeping your head safe as you blitz, keeping the range, picking them apart from the outside, use your range control, and then keeping yourself safe as you throw big shots, setting and breaking patterns. The other combination I want to note that he uses against Yoel Romero a lot. Once again, talked about Yoel Romero, very squared off stance. He realized this, so he starts front kicking a lot, particularly in the second fight. He does a lot of hopping front kicks to push him back, catches him down the middle, and I always talk about if you're going to throw a midsection kick, you should follow with the same side punch, and he does. And then he doubles up on it. He goes front kick, double punch. Uses this a lot. This is part of my favorite combination. I love the front kick, double punch roundhouse. This is my bread and butter. He uses this with the front kick, double punch. So he's here, and every time this guy starts to press in, he front kicks him to keep him at bay, and then he blitzes out. He goes front kick, bah, bah, throws the jab cross. Because while they're thinking about just coming back here and defending, now he's got their hands low, and he steps out. Beautiful stuff. So that's the majority of his offensive blitzing. The next part, we're going to come back and talk about countering. Now, countering is interesting with him because in his earlier fights, he used mostly blitzing and occasionally drawing them into counters if he felt like he was getting pressed. He has since kind of changed that since the Israel Adesanya fight, and now I see him sitting back a lot more, catching them with the counters, and when they don't engage in the luring, then he comes in here and he blitzes on them. So it's a little bit of a different switch for him. Now, this could have been just tailoring it to his fights because he's very good at picking a game plan for his fights. You see this a lot, where he has a specific game plan that he employs for each person he fights. So it could be a little bit of that, or it could be a shift in the way that he's fighting. But generally what he does is he likes to do stuff like he paws out, he picks at him, he paws out, and he draws them in. His favorite thing to do is he basically uses one of 3 different types of counters. His favorite thing to do is time it because he has the space. These guys have to move forward, right, to get to him. They can't just get to him easily. He's never in punching range. They've got to have an extraneous movement to get to him. As soon as he sees that, he covers high and he steps into his jab. His head comes low and he jabs them. He likes to catch them as they're moving in. It's a linear technique. It's shorter, and he times it so that he always literally beats them to the punch. Now, the other thing you'll see him do is sometimes he'll be pawing a lot. And if you see him using this active jab a lot, or if he's been using it offensively a lot, he goes the other way. And as you come in, he drops his head to the right, covers high, and throws across. The third thing you'll see him do is if he feels like the timing's not right as he's backing up here, he'll lean his head back and do a pull, jab, cross. That's the third thing you'll see him do. So his perfect situation is he catches you as you come in. Inside technique, quicker technique, reads your body language, stays on the outside, waits for it, pop. If you don't engage in this, no problem, he blitzes. This is one, pop, pop. He comes in and gets you. And he does this until you start wanting to get offensive. And when you feel like it's your turn to come at him, he'll be in here, and then maybe he's throwing this jab, he switches off and he throws the cross. Then he backs up, picks you apart. Stays out. If you don't engage, he blitzes. But if you do, no problem. He's ready for it. He's looking for the counter. And a lot of times, like I said, if he feels like he can't get it as you're coming in, he'll switch and he'll come back, cover his head, and do a pull, jab, cross. And he's great at lining that up as well. So that's the majority of what you're going to see out of counters. Now, he will occasionally throw stuff like your check hooks and stuff like that. But what he really likes is inside linear techniques. That's his favorite. But in the earlier fights, you mostly see him use this sporadically and mostly blitzing. And lately, the last couple fights, it looks like he seems to prefer sitting back a little bit more, leading them into it, and pop, and only using the blitz as a strategy to draw them into it. And part of that is, man, he's got his timing down on this. He's so good at timing as he sits there, pop, to catch you as you come in. And it's an execution of understanding as they press forward, anytime they come in here, to eat the shot, or, just kind of read them as they come in. So that's basically it for the counter striking. It is a very effective system where he lures them into it. He blitzes, he picks them apart. They feel like they have to get to him, pop, and as they press forward, they eat a shot. All right, so my belief is to be a successful striker, you have to be able to keep the fight on your feet. And this is something that Robert Whittaker definitely understands because he's had to fight some really, really world-class guys. Like when you talk about Rafael Natal, who was not able to take him down, despite the fact that he's like a 4th-degree black belt in Jiu Jitsu at the time under Renzo Gracie, couldn't take down Robert Whittaker, who was essentially a purple belt in Jiu Jitsu. And this is a guy, this is a matchup that, if he can't keep it striking, he's going to lose. And he was very successful at keeping it striking. I think he got taken down at the end of, one round, and he was able to defend from there, but overall, he was very successful. He's got a takedown average. His takedown defense average is something like 83%. It's very, very high. And that's after fighting guys like Yoel Romero and Jacare and stuff like that. Yoel Romero, of course, is the biggest wrestling threat he ever had to deal with, which is this, behemoth of a man who's a silver medalist. And he still stopped most of his takedowns. And when he did get taken down, got back to his feet, forcing Romero to expend a lot of energy with no real results. So it says a lot about the takedown game that he's able to employ. Or excuse me, the takedown defense that he's able to employ. Let's talk about some of the things that makes this possible. The first thing is that when you fight this outside point fighting strategy, you're already at an advantage. When I'm not fighting in the pocket all the time and I'm on the outside and I'm blitzing, this gives me a higher response time. It's why his countering is so successful because he has a lot of time to read what's coming at him. It is a big advantage. When guys do press in, you'll notice part of the reason that he keeps this front hand down is in addition to the fact that it makes it harder to telegraph so that it's harder to read it as it comes up, particularly when you talk about countering, is that it also works by keeping his elbows tight to allow him to successfully underhook when guys go for high crotches, high singles, body, any of this type of stuff, body control. It allows him to pummel under very easily because he's already on the inside and his elbows are tight. It's hard for them to successfully take him down. Then if they do go for a low single, because he's already halfway turned and because he's so far away, it's very easy for him to just push down the head and pull that foot out. On occasion, he will miss the underhook, in which case he just goes to the whizzer, but he turns out. His response is generally to turn away when somebody tries to take him down and just get out of there. And because he's got distance, he has time to respond to it. It's not like he's pressing in and he gets singled from this close range where it's harder to defend. And because of the way that he blitzes, he doesn't stay forward and clinch. It's hard to get low. It's hard to have a reactive shot when you're breaking off at an angle so that they're not catching you as you come in because you're not overcommitting to it. This allows him to not get taken down. It's part of why his takedown defense is so successful. Now, when he defends, sometimes what happens is because he turns away, though, guys will take his back. The good news is he's really good at defending from this position. In fact, when we talk about his jiu-jitsu defense, getting back to his feet, he will frequently end up against the cage with somebody on his back. His strategy, instead of doing it for like a Kimura, like very Nate Diaz or Sakuraba style, or pushing in and driving the hips back, generally what you'll see him do is take this hand from the outside, drive it, elbow in, pummel inside, and then start to create space. Whether he does a body lock, gets his head underneath, but a lot of times if he's escaping, he's just trying to head in here, frame on the hips, and get away. That's generally his strategy. If he cannot get that, and the guy's got double underhooks, you're going to see him pushing on this hips to create space until he can start to pummel in and do just that. If he's against the cage, generally what he'll do is once he gets into here, let's say he gets to a body lock or something like that, what you'll generally see him do is he'll turn, put him, and then disengage. He might throw a kick or something like that on the way out. But he's not trying to hang out against the cage. He wants space with which to work and pick him apart. That is the majority of his takedown defense. Now, his takedown offense is also very good. When you look at the Kevin Gastelum fight that he recently had, one of the things he does really well is, remember we talked about how he makes you forget about a thing? Wrestling is a good example of this. He will make you think that this fight is a striking fight. It's a 5-round fight. He does 3 rounds where he doesn't go for any takedowns. And then at the end of the 3rd round, while he's doing his normal game, like he's hitting his front kick and stuff like that, he's hitting that front leg kicking and stuff like that, he's picking apart with the counters. And then all of a sudden, out of the blue, he might feint, and then he comes in here, and he gets his single leg. If he completes it, that's great. If not, he'll do one of a couple things. He'll go for the single leg and use this to drive them back to the cage, maybe try to finish the takedown from there. Or, a lot of times what he does is he tries to go for it. If he gets it, that's great, right? He might come in here and do something like that. Sometimes then, if he doesn't get it, he goes in here, they start to push off, and then he starts to change and turn it into an attack. He starts changing levels and turning it back into striking. Then when you think that he's not really serious about it anymore, or that you think that he's already got it out of his system, he goes back to it. So you might see something like this. In round 3, he hasn't done anything for a while. He comes in and he gets a takedown and he takes you down and gets down to the ground. Then he doesn't do it again for the entire 4th round. In the 5th round, he's playing around. Pop, right? Pop, pop, pop. He goes back to that roundhouse because he hasn't used it in a while, right? He feints and goes to the roundhouse kick. And then he's in here playing, and he shoots in, and he gets his single leg because you forgot about it. Let's say you defend. Okay, he tries to drive you back. Maybe he loses it. He resets. You go, well, he only did it once in the 3rd. He's probably not going to do it again. And then a couple seconds later, he goes for it again. Maybe he goes in here. He goes high. And then you go, okay, he's got it out of his system. Then the 3rd time, he comes in for it, and he comes up with a hook. See what I'm saying? He starts playing with whether or not you take this as a serious threat. In the meantime, then you start to think about this level change, and he's threatening it, and he's threatening other things as well. Then he's threatening these hands. You got to deal with this constant blitz. And then he paws back, and he lures you, and he paws. And as you come in, he switches and he counters. It's wheels within wheels. Very high-level stuff. So his takedown offense is fantastic. But honestly, the reason he mostly ends up on top of guys is because he kicked them in the face and they fell down. This is how he most frequently ends up above somebody or gets to a top position. Is he just hits them really hard and they fall down, which is a pretty good takedown strategy in itself. So a lot of times when you see him engage in jiu-jitsu on the ground, it's because he just hit somebody. But he does threaten a lot of takedowns and he's got pretty good success off of that as well. But the biggest thing is his takedown defense. Because of the fact that he keeps it a distance, he keeps his hand low, and if he go for a low single, he turns away and he's on top of it. He has a very good ability to read them because of the distance. So his wrestling is fantastic. So stay tuned. In the next part, we're going to talk about jiu-jitsu. All right, so when we talk about jiu-jitsu, we talk about the bottom position. He basically has two strategies he plays. One for the bottom, one for the top. And he consistently does it, and he's very good at getting back to it. If he ends up on the bottom, I don't care if it's side control, if it's closed guard, wherever he is on the bottom. In the case of Yoel Romero, we're talking about when he gets clipped, and he ends up defending well in the north-south. Romero's trying to pound him. He gets in here, he'll grab a leg, put his head on the inside, stand him back up, and use this to get back to his feet. A lot of times, he's just trying to get against the cage wall. This way he can start working escapes from here, start pummeling in, circling him. If they get his back, no problem, he gets to here. So his strategy is basically get a leg, get back to your feet. If he's in side control bottom, I'm not going to use the grappling dummy for this because it's not going to show very well. He gets side control, no problem. He goes to turtle, he gets a leg, he pulls it in, gets to his feet. He gets in closed guard, no problem. He gets in here, circles through, grabs a foot, gets back to his feet. His ability to grab a hold of a leg and use this to get to his feet is very successful. This is something he will go to over and over again, and he's used it against world-class guys like Yoel Romero, so you know it works for him. That's basically his bottom game. Like, protect himself, don't get punched in the face a lot, control him, and then work himself back up to it. If he ends up in like a bottom half or something like that, you'll see him like basically just contain the upper body, keep him from posturing up. Once again, get to turtle, get to the leg, get back up. And he's had a lot of success with it. Now, from the top, most of the time he gets to the top, it's because he knocks somebody down. But sometimes he'll take somebody down as well, and he's always going for this half guard. He likes top half a lot. If you feel like, if he ends up in front of him and you get this butterfly hook or something like that, he's going to start working to get his foot. If he's passing, this is what he's looking for. Is he's just going to look not to pass, but just to get to half guard. From here, one of the things I like about him is a lot of times when guys get in half guard, you can either be super active with striking or you can be super active with passing. A lot of guys do not do very much with half guard. You do have guys like Glover Teixeira, who is very good at letting you turn away so that he can get to the back and stuff like that. He does a lot of this head and arm threat. There are guys who are very good at striking out of this position. Like Weili Zhang, you can see a lot of elbow stuff and things like that. But a lot of times guys also get on the ground and they get kind of stagnant. One of the things I like about Robert Whittaker is he is consistently going to pass to a mount every time. He gets to half guard, he's going to go to the safety belt with a hard crossface, and then from here it's very similar to like what Damian Maia used to do, where he gets his hips really high in the air and he tripods, and he'll start to do an outside knee cut to get to a mount. So it looks like this. He gets in here, gets an underhook, gets a hard crossface, hips off the ground, knee cuts across, slides the foot out, gets to his mount. If for some reason, I'm going to turn this away, he cannot get his foot out. He starts to go hard, get high, brings his foot across, foot gets stuck. He'll use his other foot, staple it, and get free. That's basically it. He will use this to get to a mount every time. Seatbelt, underhook, crossface, high hips, bring the knee across. I use this a lot. I'm a big half guard player, so when I get to half guard, this is one of the strategies I like to use a lot for passing. And usually I'll bounce between a knee cut on the inside and the outside, back step passes and stuff like that, X passes, all that stuff. But a lot of times I'm bouncing back and forth. He doesn't have to. He consistently does the same thing. He comes in here, he might throw some elbows and stuff like that, but generally right to it. Now, once he gets to a mount, what you're going to see from here is he lets people turn. This is how he gets back. He hangs out here. People feel the danger, and they start turning. He goes, okay. And he starts getting to a back from here. Now, the thing about Robert Whittaker when it comes to back control is that a lot of people, how do I put this? Yes, he has a couple rear naked chokes. Most of the time when he gets to the back, guys escape. Reality is that he has a very low success rate from here. For a guy who gets to the back as often as he doesn't finish from the back a lot. What he does is he likes to punctuate rounds a lot with this. And he shows great control. He tires guys out, makes them carry his weight. They'll get to here, he'll make him carry his weight. And eventually, a lot of times what happens is he'll end up in this position, they'll get up and escape. But in terms of finishing from the back, he does not actually finish from the back that often, considering he ends up there a lot. Every time he takes somebody down, he pretty much consistently gets to mount, gets to the back. That is a lot of takedowns and a lot of opportunities that he doesn't finish on. But the good news is he does wear them down. He safely maneuvers his position. He shows the judges he can get to control. And he threatens. It makes guys afraid to end up with him on top because they know that if they screw around, he is going to choke them. So he'll get to here. He'll get to half guard. High hips, come across to the mount, lets them turn away, comes here, gets to the back. Consistently will get to this position. But from right here, I very rarely see him do a lot. Personally, I think I'd like to see more striking from here to kind of open him up and start getting more stuff in here. I'd like to see more leg triangles and things like that, which obviously against guys like Yoel Romero, you're not going to get around that big frame, but he's got pretty long legs. I think you could probably see him using this more. But that's his jiu-jitsu game. Do I think that against somebody like Izzy that could change? I'm going to go into that in the pre-fight analysis. But overall, I hope you enjoyed this whole breakdown. Make sure you're smashing the subscribe button, share with your friends, throw in the comments below what you think and who you'd like to see as upcoming fighters for me to do these system breakdowns on. Thanks for watching, guys.